with a wonderful company called Genpact. 18 years with them. But before I start talking about, if you can just have the slide up, I just wanted to tell you a little story. So, if the cameras can zoom into this little card I have on my hand here, I found this card, and many of you may have it if you're staying in the facility here, right? And it really talks about something called transformation. I was very impressed when I saw this card, because this card has this little boy, if you can see, who's dressed up in a labor, sort of a kit, and it says transformation. I was impressed because I thought they have figured out what is my job. They've actually made a customized card, which is showing up in my room saying transformation. That kind of makes me sound good. Turns out it's more of a change they were making in the room upstairs, and they were calling that transformation, right? But more importantly, what it reminded me of, as I saw this little boy, is of my 12-year-old son. He's going to be 15 in about a week's time. The reason I'm telling you the story is because we talk about disruption, we talk about technology, we talk about millennials. Sometimes that is happening right under our noses. We sometimes choose not to see it, right? So he walks up to me, this boy of mine, about a week back, and says, "Dad, I need 15,000 rupees. So I go, "Why do you need that money?" He says, "We are a group of 4 friends. We have found this really super cool game, which we think can be the next big item that goes viral on the net. And we think this is so super cool that we should launch a company. So I've done the research. To launch a company takes about 15,000 rupees. If you can loan me that, who knows what it may turn out in 3 years' time." This is a 14-year-old. I'm 43. To launch a company will give my spine jitters to think about what it takes to launch it, right? They're thinking. 2 years ago, same guy, we walk into a mall, and I had to buy something from an Apple store. I picked up that accessory. I went to the desk to pay, and he said, "Sir, we are sorry, but our servers are down. You will have to wait maybe 10, 15 minutes. So we waited 10 minutes. The servers don't come back on. At which time, this son of mine nudges me and says, "Dad, I think we should get out of the store." I say, "Why?" He goes, "I'll tell you later. You can buy this charger of yours later, but we should step out of the store now." So we stepped out of the store. I said, "What's up?" He says, "Don't beat me up for it, but I just brought their network down. This whole mall has their network. I hacked it. They had a stupid password. I cracked it. I was wanting to see if that really works. This network is down. They will not be able to get this up in the next 2 hours, okay? But chances are they will track my IP. We could get in trouble. Let's leave." I'm telling you, these are times where you sweat thinking, what are you dealing with? You talk about millennials. Here is this guy who in 6 years' time could be either working for his own company or could be working for you, and you could be answering questions which you have no clue about. And I'm basically talking about myself. I had no idea what to do. We obviously beat a very hasty retreat from there. So you blink, the world changes. If you can have the next slide, please. Okay, thanks. So, I will not repeat what we've already heard from a whole bunch of speakers, right? There is disruptive technology, there is big data analytics, there's the millennial workforce, the 3 major changes we've been talking about. And in 2 very significant ways, they're likely to change the way we deal with talent. One, obviously, is that the supply chain will get disaggregated on demand. The second piece is that employees, from being an aggregation, will require very, very personalized experiences. And that is indeed what I'm going to talk about. So another story, and Achal, if you'll remember, we met in the morning for breakfast today, and there was this youngish guy sitting next to me. I introduced him to you, right? Turns out this guy works for a bank, about 21 years old. And he was telling me the story. I happen to be his chacha. For those in the audience who don't understand chacha, it's basically father's younger brother, okay? So he's telling me the story about how he wants to change the company he works for. It's a bank. And I said, "Why? You just joined it about 8 months back." He said, "They don't get it." I said, "What's up?" He goes, "You know what, they put me in the fraud detection unit of credit cards, and they wanted me to automate, how to do fraud detection. I worked on it. They gave me 4 months. I did it in about 3 months, right? And then we presented the report to the COO, to the CEO, and I said, look, this will take away about 68% of your workforce." And there is stunned silence on the phone call. The guy on the VC goes, "Did you say 68%? I have 700 employees doing this work globally." So how will we get rid of 700 employees basis what you're suggesting? It must be something that you're not saying right. Their expectation was that this team will only automate some things like login, log out, maybe some report automation. These guys went into it, they automated the whole thing. Their dilemma now is how to execute it. Bunch of HR professionals on that call, and they're thinking, this automation is going to take out 68% of my workforce. We have no way. We're still hiring for that, by the way. How do we get these guys out? What are you talking about, right? That project has been put on the ice. His frustration that he relayed to me is, I don't know why I want to work here anymore, Chacha. Because if they continue to do this to my projects, I don't know why they're wasting time. Now think about what will happen if this guy chooses to walk to their competition. Completely disruptive. That's what we're dealing with here. And that their example is not very far off. Okay, I'm sure all of you know Blockbuster went from 60,000 employees to zero in about 5 years. I think the only thing that is changing is that 5 years could become 5 months, 6 months, 1 year, who knows? And as we think about that, automation can really change a lot about how we think about employee training, right? If we were to look at the scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is highly skilled, as automation wipes out the need for the first 5, you're talking about a very, very huge extent of retooling that is required to get people to do the higher-end jobs. That is something we will inherit as a legacy as we hire more millennials who are really smart. The second shift you're going to see is how employees will need to be treated as consumers. I'm sure people have spoken about that, and that is being driven by 2 things in our opinion. One is big data analytics, which is really, really providing a lot of insight into how people should be given a very, very personalized experience. And the second thing is how employees continue in this environment to choose themselves to be seen as consumers. So customized employee experiences, and how do we get those experiences to really improve the effectiveness of what is bread and butter for us, which is employee practices. Now, there are a few examples we've put here, and I'm sure the speakers before us spoke about predictive analytics, right? Consider some of the examples. Performance management, for example, we are looking at, can we look at browser history? What websites are employees going to? Can we look at what certifications they have? What aspirations they have? And can we then start pushing the very, very specified jobs which are open, which show up in their portals? I've got a friend sitting here in the 5th row, Abhishek Bhatnagar. Raise your hand, please. He's one of my principal architects who's architecting this for us. And as we launch the portal, our hope is we should be able to give a very specific, something that I would look forward to as a job, as a feed to that specific employee basis, what we can study about them. Big data, technology, very specific experiences being pushed to employees. Consider another example. People who are coming from Delhi, raise your hands, please. So I'm assuming everybody is famous with the famous odd even rule, right? So, one of the thoughts we had was that can we figure out, for example, with RFID tags, what are the routes which are most often taken by employees, and give them a simple application that tells them who are the people heading in a similar direction, and therefore they can do carpooling. Because one of the reasons carpooling doesn't seem to work is people have variable timings. If I'm leaving half an hour early, half an hour late, I don't know who to call, right? Those are some of the pieces that we're thinking about, if we can enable, will be very, very useful for employees. Another example, and I think the panel before us spoke about that, but I do want to bring some color on what numbers are we talking about and what this disruption means, right? So back in, I think, about 2001, we had pioneered a system called the early warning system, which was really about analyzing the risk of employee attrition. And we then did the next best thing, which was to digitize it, put it on a portal, and now we were asking about 3,000 frontline managers to give their risk assessment for each employee, right? So the HR managers run around asking for this data, collating it, creating action plans, so on and so forth, right? The disruption that we're thinking about, which would be helpful, is really put this into predictive analytics, right? All we have to do is look at the data which is sitting in our systems. People quit because of known reasons, right? Somebody got promoted ahead of time, somebody was being paid less, they were not engaged enough in the job that they had, right? Pull all of this together, and I'm very happy to report to you, we ran a little pilot in the first quarter of this year, right? And we teamed up with an analytics firm which is helping us do that, part of our own analytics practice. And when we ran the model which they had on people who had already quit, there's an 82% match. So 4 out of 5 people, the algorithm by person detected and said this person has a more than 85, 90% probability of quitting. We checked that data, 82% right. The disruption you can obviously think about is that it takes away a lot of work from HR managers, but instead of collating Excel sheets and collating data, they can now run these reports and do something really useful for employees, which engages them versus simply data collation. That's a disruption we could all use for, I'm sure you'll agree. So basically, the way we are looking at Genpact on how do we customize employee experiences has 4 different components. The first one is to go on cloud. For those who are familiar with some of the ERP systems that we've had in the past, for 7, 8 years we had an ERP system from Oracle. We had what they call as customizations, which basically means that there were some 3,000 customizations running on that ERP platform, right? If you were to take an example of cars, this basically meant we had decided to put the steering wheel on the back seat, the brake on one window, the accelerator on another window, and we were expecting them to continue upgrading it. Doesn't happen, right? So we moved to cloud. The second piece we are using is a very, very user-centric design, and I will share some examples in a bit. Speed versus scale is again something that we've considered actively. So the mantra we are following now is if it is a mass usage application, which can be simple, our target is to launch apps in about 30 days' time. Typically, our turnaround time for launching applications for employees would be anywhere between 3 to 4 or 6 months. What we're gunning for now is 30 days. We are about 3 times more than that right now. We just launched an application for getting online feedback. It took us about 90 days' time. We have our learnings, but speed is something that we are very focused on because as technology changes, by the time you're implementing what you've decided, the world could have changed. Another example I want to give you is we had elected to go for a compensation management system in the middle of last year. And we had a conversation about how that system had been completely changed. I'm talking about Oracle Release 12 versus Fusion. And I think for a company which is fairly set in the way we do things, it was a remarkable change where we said in the middle of the project, we decided to change the technology. It took us about 6 months back in our implementation. But given the fact that it offered so much out of the box, we have chosen to change that. So that's an example again of how we're looking at speed to catch up and not always be running behind what may have already changed in the market. Some of the examples, we just implemented one of the recruitment, onboarding, and background check systems. We retired some 7 legacy systems. We're using Taleo. And one of the fears we had was that as we go completely online, will our employees adopt it, okay? In the first 3 months, I'm happy to report 96% employees very happily submitted everything online. 96%. Our own expectation was maybe somebody will show up, maybe my mobile didn't work, maybe my home connection didn't work, right? 96%, right? It is emboldening us to think about what else can we do. You know what, we have rooms like these, maybe half the capacity, in every city where people would come and fill up application forms because they're not able to get anything online, right? If you think about it, in 3 months' time, all of this, what we have as real estate, could be converted into revenue-generating workstations for us, instead of having people come down and use premises for doing this kind of work. We've also launched an application which is really about getting all the engagement work happening before people join. Very simple application. We should be able to launch it about 30 days' time. Another example of user-centric design. So for the longest time, from an HR standpoint, you make your goal sheets, you have milestones, you have percentage completion, you got this, you got values, you got competencies. It becomes a 3-page long form. How many people have seen forms like that? Raise your hands. And continue to raise your hands if you love filling them. I guess as much, right? And therefore, we went to the users asking, guys, why do we have to threaten you with withholding your bonus for filling up something which is going to get your increment, your appraisal form? The answer was resonating, very simply saying, it's too much. What do you want us to do? All you want us is to get feedback, and you want us to give feedback, right, from supervisors, why don't you just focus on that, right? So we've just launched an application called iPerform app. That's an internal name for that app. It is really based on Karmanos. We worked with Salto-Defe. And I'm very happy to report the screenshot you see here. After a lot of deliberation, and I can tell you there were howls of protest on why there is nothing else. The first time we launched it, the leadership team said, is that it? Really? Is that it? Right? And it has just two buttons, which says, give feedback, get feedback. That's the purpose of the app, right? There's nothing more to it. That's what this is. The example on the right is of the chief learning officer. The first time I sent this to him, he goes, yeah, but I don't have to do anything else. There is nothing that goes round and round, fetching names, doing anything. That's it. I put the feedback and it comes to you. Yeah, do you want it more complicated? He said, no, obviously, they loved it, right? This is already online. Employees are loving it totally. It is the simplicity of design. And I think the one thing that we changed is, as opposed to asking the organization and staffing leader or asking the people who are wanting to design the most comprehensive spaceship called performance management, we got a bunch of employees in there and said, guys, tell us why you don't fill this in time. This is what they told us. It's done. So how many people saw the presentation in the morning which had this robot going up and down? You all saw it? Did you love it? OK. So we are already using it. And I can tell you, it is a huge differentiator. OK? And it is a fairly simple device. It has a self-balancing wheels, which takes a Bluetooth instruction from the iPad, which is riding on top, telepresence tool. And we have put it to really ingenious uses. I'm sure there are hundreds of more use cases which we haven't thought about. But think about it. We are now doing virtual floor walks for our prospective clients. Wherever possible, wherever it is OK to show the shop floor, we are showing it to clients. And they are wowed because they don't have to travel to 12,000 miles. And if they like it, they're obviously very welcome, but they're able to see that. Virtual presence at meetings, remote interaction with teams. So one of the challenges we had was, there's one HR manager, he's got teams split across 3 or 4 different cities, right? Similarly, frontline managers who've got their teams split across 2 cities because there is business continuity planning that has to be done, right? Now, we're experimenting with some of this stuff being available in both the locations, and therefore, the frontline manager does not have to really bother about going up and down 3 times every month, right? Stuff in motion. The next thing that we're going to think about is, can we really show our prospective joinees who we are hiring from remote towns, to have some kind of a device from which they can see the shop floor and have a good understanding on what they're signing up for, some of the applications. So we are aggressively embracing all of these disruptions using social, mobile, a bunch of different things, including predictive analytics. Some examples of what we're thinking about. Adopting social has been a bit of a challenge in our own thinking, I think. We worry about the 700 clients and their data. So we are talking to multiple folks like Facebook at Work, and hopefully that should be something that we should be able to launch, given the kind of popularity Facebook has, among many other options we're evaluating. Natural language processing. So our help desks cater to employees. We are thinking about having a single help desk in which queries can be answered by simple questions being asked, which can then be turned into text, which can be crawled for analytics, so on and so forth. Delve, which is knowledge management, running at multiple different levels, and wearables. Some of the use cases that you've already heard about in the afternoon about healthcare and how wearables can help enrich employee lives are some of the pieces. I will take a pause here, invite Yash to take over from here. But this really was about what disruption means to us, what it means to employees, how we are turning this around to help create a better future for the company and for the employees. I hope you liked and enjoyed what we present today. Thank you.
Thanks, Yuvraj. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'll try and build on Yuvraj, OK? What I'll do is I have a couple of slides, but I'll try to give you a perspective from an HR professional's point of view and from a CHRO's point of view. What does disruption mean to us in HR? and what does this entire evolution of HR technology brings for us, okay? That's the way we have structured, and happy to talk about that. And before I even go to my slides and, talk about it, so talking about the millennial, which is being spoken right from Jason's opening, until even mentioned by Yuvraj just a few minutes ago. And that's true, okay? I'll give you a small example. This morning, so I put on a suit because I'm speaking at SHRM, okay? Usually I don't wear a suit, but I put on a suit and I came for breakfast. So my daughter is home. She is having a prep leave. She's a medical student. So she is at home with us, and we were both sitting down for breakfast. And she asked me that, why are you wearing a suit today? So I said, I'm speaking at an SHRM conference later on. Okay. She goes on to a mobile. Now, in earlier days, they would ask you, what is SHRM, right? She types Yash plus SHRM and does a search. And she's got to know about SHRM in 3 minutes. She doesn't want to ask me a question. Okay. Now, the danger is you don't know what she knows about SHRM. Okay. And after 3 minutes of looking at her phone while we are having breakfast, and my wife, being a good mother, says, no mobile phones on the dining table. Okay. So she puts it down, and then as I'm about to get up and leave for office, she says, Dad, what's with you, SHRM, and this suit? So I said, what do you mean? She says, I just saw online you were in the SHRM office in Washington, and you were wearing the same suit. So Achal had invited me to the SHRM office in Washington, and I didn't know that I was wearing the same suit. Well, my daughter knows, but I want you to believe I have more suits, okay, first of all. I do have. But I don't know why I picked this up. But I said yes, but I said it's a different shirt. She said it's the same shirt. Now, she's seen this on a picture somewhere, out of her search. And then when I sat in the car, I saw, actually the picture shows me, which was posted on Twitter, which was posted on Facebook. It had gone. So I told her, okay. And then the least I could have done was, so I changed my tie, my pocket scarf, and I used a different cologne. Not that it makes a difference in the picture. Okay, but just to feel different. But that's how the millennials behave today. They don't want to ask you too many questions. They will ask you just the question they want. And that's really impacting because, the question that you asked about predictive analysis. Now, I work for one of the most enterprising gentlemen in this world, I would say, not just India, Mr. Dilip Sangvi. And I have a lot of colleagues from Sun Pharma here, who will vouch for what I'm saying. These are incredible people. Incredible. I mean, in a lifetime, not just building an organization, but even creating a market cap for just one of his companies, which is Sun. Though I work for all his group companies, but just for his Sun, which is more than the market cap of very old groups put together, okay, is phenomenal. The value creation, the ability to create value, the ability to build a business, the ability to engage talent, 33 years ago and now is the same. And looking at those people, it makes you wonder, do these guys need technology to build enterprises and corporations? So in fact, this is the similar debate that once he and me had. That could we use predictive analysis, because now we have 50,000 employees, okay, and growing, to figure out. And he says, well, Yash, isn't it the job of every manager to know when he looks into their eyes whether they're going to stay or leave the company? He says, that's the way I figure out. And I have not gone wrong. That's why not many people have left me. Now, this makes you wonder that what is it that we want to leverage in technology, okay? So what I'm going to talk to you today is a little bit which has already been spoken a lot, but this will just give you a sense of what is, the talent landscape. How is it shifting? What are the paradigm shifts? And you must have heard a lot of these things common right from Jason to, this session. But let me highlight a few, okay, in this. So I truly believe, now this is not from someone else, but I truly believe in certain industries, sooner than later, such as the ones which are in services and solutions, we will move from talent and people on premise to talent in cloud. What does that mean? It has already begun, okay? When you say working from home, and while preparing, with the panel, I was just telling them, and just to draw your attention, if you look at it, that what is the amount of money we spend on HR technology per person? There's not a single survey in the world which can tell you that, and which is sad, because the evolution is happening so fast. Collecting of data is so difficult despite having best of the technology. I was speaking to my friend Josh, because whenever I have doubts, anything around tech, what's happening in the global world, I call him and he educates me, okay? And he said that, Yash, even I have no idea. We have, so Burson by Deloitte, which was his company, which is now the Deloitte company, they said, we do a lot of surveys. I can tell you what's happening in the financial services industry. Their average is about $227 per person, but the range is so huge that it can vacillate from $160 per person to about $200,000 or $2,000 per person, And I asked him, why is that? And he says, because it's different. Some people just take the software cost as a cost of HR technology. Some people take it at ICT, which is information and communication technology, so even the usage of mobile phone, etc. goes. So he says, there's no standard way of collecting data, but we know what the averages are. I said, okay, good. And the reason I was trying to find that out is not because of this conference, but it's because of the IT architecture that we are designing at Sun. And it's going to be truly disruptive, and I'll tell you why in a couple of minutes when you see the next slides. And this is where Jason and me bonded on day one when he was speaking here and I was doing business in Delhi for my company. But I could completely keep track of what's happening in his session around day one because of technology again, okay? This Twitter squad here, the blogger squad here, have literally made the conference available offline or online to people offline, okay? So those are the kind of disruptions happening, and I have always believed, what kind of an HR IT architecture do I need for Sun? Because here I come 26 years after working for top-notch multinationals like Johnson & Johnson, Philips, all over the world, join a company which is already great. It is. You look at its business results, you look at its talent acquisition rate, you look at its employee engagement, they measure everything. When I joined this company, and I do an assessment in the first 3 months of this company, it's the fastest growing healthcare company in the world, okay, the most profitable in the world, and it has built its HR, IT technology with native intelligence, and whatever they have, it works. Nothing is broken. What do you transform in a place like this? Because I have worked in very large companies where we have had to take help from IBM and Accenture to help us reduce waste because of the over-design of the IT architecture that we had built. So the responsibility to create value is far, far higher than any one of you can imagine that you shoulder when you're trying to take a company which is already great to move the needle to take it somewhere else. So with that thinking in mind, let's look at what are the talent shifts that's happening, okay? This is a very interesting one, death of the laptop and desktop, okay? Because hardware also is an important factor of your technology software interface, and not many of us really understand as to what innovation is happening in the hardware space, because we keep tracking a lot of innovation that's happening in the software space. And I'll give you a very good example of Cornerstone On Demand, which they have been my partners for very long, even in my previous organization. We had done a massive company-wide implementation in Philips of Cornerstone On Demand, okay? And it was one of the most successful ones. And they were fantastic partners who helped me succeed in my previous role. To an extent, when Unilever wanted to go for Cornerstone On Demand, so Leena Nair, now she has become the CHRO. That time she was not their CHRO. But her boss, Doug Bailey and Leena, they called me, came and spent a week with me to understand how we had implemented Workday and Cornerstone on demand because Unilever was going with the same combination. Now imagine, two senior people, Doug Bailey, CHRO Unilever, Lena, who was the head of all talent and all the COEs at that time, now she's a CHRO, coming and spending 7 days with my team on my premise, looking, tell us, Yash, what works, what doesn't work. These are diligent leaders. They are the ones who want to understand the technology before they want to make decisions. That's the leadership shift that's happening. Death of the laptop to intrusive wearable devices. We have been hearing a lot about the wearable devices, right? I'll give you another example here, my own example. So I'm a big fan of watches. Very fortunate to have inherited and to have built a collection of fine watches. I just like it, okay? It was very close to me. So when Apple came with its watch, I was mighty excited because I'm an Apple fan. I continue to be an Apple fan. And if you love technology, like me, which I do, and you come up with a watch, and if you love watches, perfect, right? And Gautam knows this because Gautam was at that conversation. So I booked my Apple Watch when it was released, and it was being flown from Germany into Holland because they had not released it in Holland. So, it was coming in by post. And just 2 days before that, I was sitting in Holland with some of my team members having a beer. Gautam was there, Arman was there, and Arman asked me a question. Now, Arman is a millennial, okay? He still continues with Philips there. He said, boss, tell me one thing. You are going to wear an Apple Watch? So I said, yes. And you think you will stick to it? I said, I bought it, so of course. He says, let me tell you, the biggest mistake you're doing. And I couldn't believe it. And I kept thinking, and we had a very, very interesting discussion that evening as to why. Now I'll tell you my experience. As soon as I got the watch, I used it for 2 weeks, and after that I haven't touched it. I can't even sell it on eBay. It is very intrusive, but that I could learn only through experience. It is so, if you think that phone is intrusive, but still you have a disconnection with your phone, okay? Because when you want, you can put it on silent and you can keep it away. So there's a break in the intrusion. Then you again pick up, depending on how you have configured it, you can see the alerts. But with a watch, you can't take off your watch before every discussion, right? It is so intrusive that it started screwing up my mind. It's a fact. And 2 weeks, I was done, and my old watch was back. But what I couldn't see, being an enthusiast of watches and technology, was seen by this millennial, even without going through the experience. So this wearable is a highly intrusive technology. How it'll pan out, what kind of innovation will happen in that, needs to be seen, okay? But mobile is here to stay, for sure. And apart from that, I don't want to touch on anything else, just one more. And I don't know how many of you have heard, I think organizations should give up this concept of expecting people will have lifetime careers. So even wanting to know how long a person will work with me, because people now are not seeking lifetime careers. They are looking at tour of duty. Their tour of duty could be 6 months. Their tour of duty could be 3 years. It could be 7 years. And they want that contract. If we can contract people and then measure attrition from that point of view, that I hired these set of people, I expect them to stay with me for just 2 years and create this value, then my attrition for those people is 0%. I should not count them in attrition. That's the thinking towards which we need to go, because that's the talent paradigm shift that's happening. No point in saying that I hire 50 engineers from IITs and then my attrition is 60% at the end of 1 year. Well, it's not going to get better. So what are we measuring ourselves against? Think about that. When we talk about HR technology and when the cost comes, you talk to any HR professional, and when I have done it with my fellow CHROs or my fellow HR colleagues, they say, oh, HR tech, so you're talking about payroll, talent management, succession planning, talent acquisition, right? A few more, then they'll talk about workforce planning, one or two might get added. But let me tell you, the continuum of HR technology is nothing but a continuum of the HR processes available in this world. Many of us don't even have the processes in our organization for which we are sourcing technology. For example, you don't have a workforce planning process, but you are talking to IBM because you know that they have a workforce planning tool. Are we going to create a process before we even have the technology? Think. Knowledge management. And this is where the complexity of HR technology starts, is when you as a CHRO or when you as a HR professional do not know what is the need of your business and how do you go about designing the HR architecture before you start putting platforms on it, before you start putting software on it, and before you start making applications available to the end user. It's an entire pyramid. I think my plea to my HR colleagues always has been, often is you don't have to be an architecture expert, but at least know what is available, why is it required, think through it. And let me just give you an example of this, okay? But a few things to just note here. It's a market that's booming. The HR tech market is booming. Just look at the figures that I've just put there, which we just collected. It's amazing, but there's one figure if I was to put, that what's the waste of HR technology after companies have bought it. Now, I have that figure, but I didn't want to put it here because the source did not confirm a revised data for that. But all I can tell you is there's 30% wastage in the cost of HR technology that is bought by companies. Means you buy something on premise or you buy something on cloud and you're not being able to make it work. 30% wastage. Think about it. So what are some of the disruptions, okay, from a technology point of view now, connecting from the talent, okay? And a lot of this has been talked about. So mobile app-based learning content, all right, outstanding, which you have totally disconnected the user from what you do at the back end. It's like when you go and buy a car, okay, you buy a Mercedes or you buy a BMW, you are not bothered if this car is assembled in India, it's painted in Germany or what. You want to buy a car. You are not bothered about what the internal process of BMW or Mercedes are. Okay? You as a customer are just bothered about buying your car. Now, if Merck starts giving an explanation, well, this silver is different from the same silver 3 years ago because that was painted in Germany and this is painted in Pune. You'll say, God damn it, I have nothing to do where you paint your cars. Give me the same silver that I had. Yeah? That's the user expectation. That's the customer expectation. Now translate that to technology. It's the same. Your employees are not bothered about what your HR technology architecture is, whether you have software as service or whether you have software on premise, whether you have platform as service or your platforms are on premise, they're not bothered. They're saying, I want to learn something where I want to build my capability. Is it available on my mobile? That's it. That's the simple question that's asked. Now, if you cannot design and deliver that at a low cost or a cost that is efficient, let me tell you, we have failed in our role, our job. It's not the CIO or the IT function that has failed. We have failed. Now think everything from this perspective, okay? The biggest, and that's why I like Cornerstone on Demand, and I told Arun I'll make a mention. The reason I like Cornerstone on Demand as a talent management suite over others are also good, okay? We do have SuccessFactors right now, but I am contemplating Cornerstone on Demand for a reason, because it's a talent suite which is in cloud, but developed by people who understand cloud, okay? And don't charge you just because they're on cloud for every revision that they come up with. They just got it right, and I have utilized it. So maybe I may have a bias. And let me tell you, one of the things that I like about them is they were not perfect when they started. Even when we did our massive implementation in Philips, there were cybersecurity issues. We could not take the apps on our mobile for a year The issues were internal as well as external, but that's where you need a partner who will work and resolve it, right? So software as a service is gone. It's no more a sexy thing. Platform as a service is there, but let me tell you, the disruption that will happen is architecture as service. I was just talking to Glenn and the IBM people. I was just talking to them. So IBM, Accenture are really doing some cool stuff on this. They used to talk to me in the previous organization. They're talking to me here also, where I'm telling IBM and Accenture, why should I design my own HR architecture? I don't want to. You provide me the entire architecture, platform, software as service at this cost, at these needs. Can you do that? Now, they are not able to do it today. We know it. They have solutions. IBM has made tremendous progress with that open HR, source platform. But again, they have the talent management suite, which is SuccessFactors. And I shouldn't be bothered about what they use, okay? But they're still not being able to stitch it because of the internal problems that we have where our processes are inconsistent. This is the way we are designing our architecture in Sun. And let me throw you some examples. So the challenge here began not by doing something that already exists, okay? But is by doing something that will be truly disruptive. What is the employee experience that we are going to hire, okay? So Manish is sitting here, okay? Manish has just joined my team. He was the global head of HR for GE for their power and gas business in Boston, okay? So he just joined us in Sun, in my senior leadership team as global head of HR for the Sun operations. And I was very cool. I told him, do you want to continue being based in Boston, Manish? Choice is yours. He says, Yash, I want to move back to India, because he wanted to move back to India because of his family. But the reason I'm telling you this is because while hiring Manish, a person like him, who are very expensive, they're very expensive people. So, but they also create that value. But when hiring people like them, I am now thinking, what kind of HR technology I will have in this company? So not only that they remain engaged, but they can create far greater value. That's the thinking going on when I'm selecting my people. Now, he chose to relocate himself from Boston and be based in Mumbai, is fine. But I'm very clear, my leadership team members can be based anywhere. Then we hired Monisha, okay, as my head of Total Rewards Global. And she said that I want to be based in Amsterdam. I said, please, go ahead, no issues. She's based in Amsterdam, does her job globally. Her team is based out of India. It works. Why? Again, is because of... So I'm just trying to tell you, even when you build your team and the kind of talent and caliber that you attract, okay? And in 2 months, my global leadership team will be done. In fact, you will start seeing the announcements. These are absolutely top-notch people who are joining the company, okay? Having worked for GE, I don't want to take names before, but they're top-notch companies, they're top-notch leaders, they're joining Sun because of the excitement and because of the value that they can create. Now, if I don't have the technology and platform, just think what will happen below, okay? So, very simply, you have stuff on premise, you have stuff on cloud, okay? And I was sharing this with Jason and with Abhijit last night. You have to be crystal clear. Why do you need to go in cloud? For what? Not just because cloud is a sexy word today, okay? What does a software in cloud mean? What are the advantages it has versus disadvantages? So both, having your software on-premise and having your software on cloud has advantages and disadvantages, cost being one of the major factors. But what is it that you need on-premise? So say, for example, payroll, CNB, talent management, okay? And talent management, you talk about the talent review, you're talking about, not talent development. And your performance management. Now, performance management, you're not talking about your entire performance management, but you're just talking about your performance appraisal recording, okay, in the system. I'm very clear, I want all these on the premise, because I see no value in having these systems on the cloud. Why should I pay more in having these systems on the cloud? Because each one is a cyclic process. Even payroll is a cyclic process. It's used only 5 days a month. The rest of the days, I can put the system on a jack to bring in a revision if I want to. I don't want the system in a cloud. And payroll is the most expensive system, by the way. Huh? Majority of the companies, you will find, if you read Gartner and Burson, you'll realize there are companies who pay more in outsourcing their payroll versus they pay for investing in their learning management system. Why do you need your payroll to be in the cloud? I know if ADP was around, they would hate me for that. But why do you need your compensation and benefit system to be in cloud? Not required. So this is the way you go to devise your architecture. I'm just giving you. But imagine what will happen in the, now we are designing it ourselves because it's not available today, and we are executing it. But in future, I would love to have someone who can do the entire thing for me. I don't care who it is, if it's IBM, if it's Accenture, if it's Cornerstone on Demand, if it's SAP, SuccessFactors, whoever. You decide, you do it. But can I do it? But at this cost, at this delivery. It will come. It's not here. But at least till then, get to an advanced level of trying to do it nicely. Yeah, now I'm just trying to, kind of conclude with a few things, and then I'll end with a story, okay? So, talent versus technology experience, and this is something that Josh and me have really worked very hard upon. So, this entire debate on high touch and personal touch in certain areas, spaces, versus the technology doesn't make you high touch, and technology can make you high touch, whatever, okay? So, there are three things. First of all, you've got to evaluate very clearly, where is the high touch required? Now, do you need a high touch in handing over a payroll slip to a person? No. It's low touch. Do you need high touch in handing over their Form 16s to them? No. It's low touch, so it moves on technology platform. Yeah? But you need a high touch when you're recruiting a person, when you're onboarding a person. But can technology be leveraged to make it more effective, where you can still have high touch and still have technology? And you saw in the morning, I guess, in that entire robotic one, how you can do it. I mean, even simple things such as Skype. But getting your Skype connection right, with the right bandwidth in your office, with a terrific experience, you can make it high touch. You don't need to go into very expensive equipment, which is telepresence and all that. They're nice, but you don't have to. You can. That's where. So it's not how your technology is touching people. It's how people are touching your technology and experiencing it. That's the biggest shift. Keep that in mind. Keep that in your design thinking, and you'll get it right. I'm not going to speak about predictive talent analytics, agile and scalable. All this has been talked, and but this is again one of the ones that I want to end with. And I have believed in it. I won't put the burden on the entire HR team, but I would like to keep it a bit higher. And I say the CHRO should be capable of envisioning and defining the technology, architecture, platform, application design, and interfaces as much as a CIO for HR. As much as a CIO, sometimes even better than the CIO. For HR, I'm talking about. HR leaders can no longer choose to be technology agnostic. There's no choice. This entire thing about building digital mindset or not, don't worry, it'll happen. You focus on designing the right architecture, platform, and applications. You'll get it right. And of course, last that I want to end with is a quote from my friend Josh. Digital isn't new technology. It's new ways of behaving. Technology has not been designed or is being developed to suggest the processes you should have in your organization. That's our job. We need to then source, find, and co-develop technology that will help us with our processes. And of course, last but not the least, a quote from me for this conference: the role of HR and its technology is to innovatively create and deliver superior employee experience and business impact. You take out the word business impact, let me tell you, none of us deserve to be in HR. And if you take out a superior employee experience from this, well, let me tell you, we cannot call ourselves HR. Let's not forget, human resources is all about human beings, But let's not get emotionally lost in the debate of what's high touch and low touch. Let's see what's required that needs to be given to an employee, to anyone. And just to tell you, one of the things that we are working towards is, it's a very ambitious plan that our team has taken over, and I'm glad people like Cornerstone and many other people are helping us with that, SAP. I'm trying to design a technology, architecture, platform, and software which will create the best-in-class employee experience and business results at a cost lower than $50 per person. Okay? Let's see if we achieve it or not. But do keep cost and efficiency in mind. Now I'll give you one example of this, and close it in closing. So even personally, when it comes to using technology and paying for it, we do it, but with a lot of diligence. So I'm a photographer, okay? And I do a significant professional level photography. So I pay about $100 to $120 per month on my post-processing softwares because I shoot in Camera Raw. So because I shoot in RAW, I don't shoot in picture file, I shoot in data files. So to process them, and of course, the two main ones that I use is Adobe's, Camera Raw, and Lightroom, and then I use Capture One. And I pay about $100, $120. And the way these guys get me and keep me paying is because they have a list of all the equipment that I have. They analyze all the photographs that I post, not all, but almost 90%, because they track me. And then they keep telling me that, Yash, you have equipment which is costing worth $500,000, okay? Now, I get surprised, how the hell do they know what's the cost of my equipment? And they're pretty much accurate. So Capture One is tracking me, and they're saying, Yash, your equipment, your camera equipment that you've been buying and that you possess is equivalent to $500,000. You don't want to spend $100 on post-processing, which is the fourth pillar of photography, and they get you. Because post-processing is the fourth pillar of photography. Even in the dark ages of no photography to the good ages of the film to the digital. What has changed is chemistry has got replaced with digital. So the film and the chemicals of processing have got replaced with a sensor and digital data files. But the physics of light, capturing light, creating an image, has remained the same. And digitization has happened on that physics, is not replacing that physics. So when it comes personally, we are willing to pay. As an organization, you also should be willing to pay, but what you value. So that not only you're good at shooting photographs, you will be able to make and create fantastic images. The same thing needs to happen in your work. Whatever we are trying to do, a superior employee experience, well, don't let it remain an intent. Use technology and your knowledge and the power of partnerships. And as I said, have the right partnerships. Achal is here. So, one commitment I made to my entire global HR team, so our global HR team is a significant team, is I'm going to invest heavily in developing HR capability for the future. And then we sat down with my leadership team, and I said, we can't do it ourselves. That's where we talked to SHRM, and she came with the experts from US, from here, and they came and met me and my team, and we were convinced. We said, let's not do this ourselves. So we have tied up with SHRM, and I've told them, you please run our HR Capability Building Academy. And now Achal and her team are going to sign a contract with us next week where they're going to build the HR Academy, and there's one clear, unflinching focus that I have and she has. We will create such capability with such innovative and unique learning interventions that it will become the most impactful way for business and joy for my people. That's it, nothing else. So do go and talk to partners, but talk to partners who have the experience, who have the so-called finesse and class, as I say, and class not in terms of the way they dress, but in the way they address their problem, the way their attitudes are, whether it's Cornerstone on Demand, whether it's SHRM, there's plenty available out there. Don't try to do everything yourself. You will not succeed. On that note, I just want to end this and just pass it on to the next speaker on the panel. But if there are any other questions, would be happy to say that. Thank you so much, and let's stay passionate about HR technology. I am, and I'm very passionate about HR. Thank you.
Yes, just to add to what you said, your phone is all intrusive. It is tracking every movement of yours, even if you put it on silent. My kids sit in Gurgaon and I live in Mumbai. They know whether I'm in Dubai or Barcelona or what. And that's Apple, which is only limiting it to your phone and to the people who can see it. But Android is worse. It's available in the cloud. The videos available on YouTube. You can see it for yourself. So don't worry, you can wear your Apple Watch back. So the CIO's role has changed in the last 25 years. So I started working in 1990, and it was the world of mainframes. So before I talk of how did they get to their Mercedes and Aston Martins, I would like to ask a question. How old do you think this person would be who saw the advent of photocopier, the PC, client-server technology, internet, mobiles, and the internet on the mobile, and the app world as we see today? Any guesses? Any other guess? Yeah, actually, you're right. He'll be about 53 to 55. It's all in the last 30 years we saw.
Okay.
The change in technology. As I said, I started working on mainframes, and today we have come a long way. My mobile is my office today. Wherever I travel, I just need a mobile. I stopped carrying my laptop about 2 years now. How does that sound? Weird, right? So when I started working in 1990, I started working for a company called Xerox, and the project I was put on was what you guys use it on a daily routine today, your printers today. Those printers were the old dot matrix printers, would take ages. And everybody called us the idiots then. And they said, this project will never succeed, never see the daylight of anything. So what Xerox wanted was experience, what these guys have been talking, and the predecessors before them had been talking. They said a report should be available on print if they want it on print, on the fly, not wait for the printer queue to come out. So once we started way back in, technology started shaping in end of 80s and early 90s when the PC came into the world. And IBM guys said there will be one PC per organization and it can be only black colored and blah, blah, blah. And I wish that gentleman was around to see today. And 92, the desktop was coming into the organization on a larger scale. It was expensive, $1.5 lakh. Today it's what, 30,000? And the server, you know how big the server was then? Your table was the hard disk, which would be only 350 MB. Today, we have gigabytes of hard disk in our small little laptops. I have a MacBook. It has 250 GB of hard disk inside, and it's thin as a paper. So when all these guys use the technology which you guys enjoy as HR folks, we were the ones who were working behind the bonnet or under the bonnet of these Aston Martins and Mercs to make it happen. In the last 25 years, the technology which has come to you as what is called today architecture, the HR we knew then was hire to retire. Today it has become hire to resign. Because the average life cycle of an employee is about 5 years. Although Yash says about 3 years. That's what he told me outside when I met him. About 3 to 5 years. Because an employee would join and he would typically retire when I started working. And that was our father's generation, what we saw. And when I chose to do my post-graduation in computer science, I have an uncle, he's about 82 now. In the US, he retired from PepsiCo International. He said, "Terko muneem banna hai kya?" So that was the advent of technology way back in 80s, when people like me went into technology. And little did we know, the car which is going to come out is going to be an Aston Martin of technology world over the next 25 years or 30 years. So from the mainframes, we went on to Unix servers, to client server technology, to to whatever we see today in the last 30 years. And technology as we see it today has changed. I have two teenage sons. And typically, we would switch off their internet before exams so that they can concentrate on their studies. And I get a call from Delhi, Gurgaon rather, where my kids live. Papa, आपको मालूम है, internet is the basic necessity of life these days. And when I started working in 1990, till I finished my engineering, I didn't even know what computer was till I went to do my postgrad. I had not seen a computer then. We didn't even know there was something called computer-aided design. That is the change which has happened. Today's millennial generation, which we are all part of in some way or the other, do not realize how have we evolved to what we are today. Cloud as a service or application as a service or a software as a service today was unthinkable 25 years ago. The evolution has been long. The evolution which is coming, which Yash and Yuvraj has pointed out, is that we are going to be all mobile, and yet our networks need to be fixed. And half the time, although I have a fancy mobile like Yash or Yuvraj, it doesn't connect because the networks don't work. That's the focus which is being happening in India at least. When I go to the US or Europe, it works. It simply works. Any guesses how did the mobile world came around? Again, necessity is the mother of invention. In the Scandinavian countries, there are mountains and snow. It's not easy to traverse to meet people. And laying telephone lines through ice and snow are not easy. So some idiot in Nokia decided, let's have wireless technology to work. And mobiles were born. And then a small experiment happened in England. And a company called Vodafone was born, and that made commercial use of mobile phones. And in 2000, I remember when I was working with GE, my boss said, you wait and watch. This mobile phone is going to be your office tomorrow. And my boss was in the US then. I said, I don't deny that, but I would love to see it happen in my lifetime. And I eat my humble words today. It is there. And my kids submit their homework on the mobile, not on their desktop. A fancy desktop which is there. And the whole 9 yards of transaction for banking, everything is happening. And the amount of money, which is the cost, which Yash was referring to, is not so much on the software. It is on security. And the focus is slowly shifting to data security. We know that ransomware is a reality today. And that is what we as CIOs need to protect HR data more than the architecture or anything else. And in my case, I have another responsibility. I head a chain of hospitals for a Reliance Group. So patient data is more sacrosanct. I have Amitabh Bachchan's to Shatrughan Sinha's to everybody's data with me. What if a journalist was to know what is going on with them? And the print media would be, next day I'll be looking for a job. So my job is more complex than, putting an application out in the cloud or putting an application to make a unit work. So ransomware and cyber wars have taken a different meaning completely to get today. We call Chinese hackers. There is a bunch of Romanians who do a better job than Chinese hackers and nobody talks of them. I'm sure people who have lived in Europe will know that better. And there are tools freely available on the internet to hack into any system, believe me. All you need to do is hunt it properly. I was in a conference last year on a healthcare IT summit, and people said, you're joking. And it took me 35 minutes to crack open everybody's laptop. So security is the next thing which is going to be taking a huge part of the cost of doing business today. And there are banks like State Bank of Mysore, which got hacked a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of data has been compromised. So security is taking the forefront, and security professionals are now making a big move into every field. And we don't consider an app anymore. We consider everything as part of security setup we do in IT. So whether it is HR or finance or patients or whatever we do today, or the financial transactions which people like Yuvraj do, are all part of the security setup we have to do. That's all I have to say. I don't want to do anything more because you guys have been over it since morning. Questions for any of us now? I see time's up, so I had to stop. Oh, the questions are coming here. I can't see that, so I suddenly saw that.
So I can take that because we've been working on this one. So I do think that from a robotic automation standpoint, there are some processes which are more amenable to getting robotic process automation done. For example, people who are spending tons of time reconciling data on payroll kind of activities or accounts payable. Some of the more repeatable, reliable kind of processes. The challenge, however, is not with the technology, but also the fact that the diversity of how accounts payable, for example, happens. Different formats of invoices, different formats of how people submit data. That makes it a bit of a challenge. I don't think has been cracked completely so far. But I think oftentimes with technology, it's a question of asking the right question, asking what is the right outcome to deliver, and 9 times out of 10, technology will have a solution, if not now, maybe 2 years later. So I don't know if the point about crying or smiling is about people losing jobs. The way we see that is, it will mean people who are doing perhaps routine work for which they could be utilized for doing something much better value add in a higher skill category is something which could be reasons to smile. But if you choose not to upskill yourself, whether automation happens or not, chances are you may not be left smiling for a long time, is the way I would put it.
Just to add to what he's saying, there is a bank called Yes Bank. Most of you would have heard about it. What they have done is they've taken away the PBX and they put a virtual assistant there. It's automated the complete process of how to access your bank or the person at the end on the cloud through a PBX, which is actually a virtual PBX. So when you call them, they don't talk of, there is no person answering or an IVR going up. You talk to that virtual assistant, which is a process automation or robotic process automation, the simplest form. It's happening as we talk today. And they've taken the mundane job of putting an expensive IVR and putting a fancy thing which people can talk to. It's like Apple Siri, which is working for you there.
Yep.
Yeah. There's one more there. What about career paths?
What needs to be done different for digital natives? Can I take that on?
Sure.
Career paths are not going to be existing any longer very soon, because it's all going to be technology based, and you could be sitting, as he was saying, his team is all over the world, and there is a company as part of the Reliance group, Reliance Communication. We don't have a call center left anymore. There are people, there are housewives who can work for 4 hours, 5 hours. They work from their home. And there are team leaders who can work 7 hours. They work from their homes. Yet they meet virtually every week. So career paths from, let's say, an HR trainee to, let's say, Yash's job is going to be far more complex if it exists, but a very interesting journey, I would say.
No, I'll build on that. You see, one of my experiences has been, I think, just building on what my colleague just said, the millennials and a lot of people even from my generation were not seeking career paths, they were seeking career experiences, okay? You look at it in that light. So there are people who are very clear what career experiences I want. So, earlier the definition of career path, the image that would come to someone's mind was just vertical. That I'll start as a sales trainee, I will become a territory manager, I'll become a sales manager, I'll become a national sales director, and then head of sales. And then I want to become a CEO. That was the definition of a career path. Today, when you look at talent, the way they are educating themselves and the way they are seeking careers in organizations, their career experiences involve working in a geography. Their career experiences involve working in different functions, working in different industries, and like it or not, or believe it or not, working with chosen different people. And I can believe that. Now, that's what is changing. Are you as an organization aware of this when it comes to what are the career experiences your people are choosing, are aspiring for, are wishing for? versus what you can offer to them? I think that's the challenge. So the jury is still out on that.
It will be interesting next 5 to 10 years to see how the next generation shapes it up.
Correct. There's another one.
What do you expect from the from the rest of the business line to enable disruption in HR tech?
From the rest of the business, what do you expect from the rest of the business to enable disruption in HR tech? Well, I don't know, Nandan, what exactly you mean by this, but going by the spirit is if you're saying that what does line managers from the business expect from HR tech, I'm not sure they expect too much or too different from what they've expected in the past, okay? Very, very good line managers expect three things from HR. And whether you deliver it with technology or without technology, it doesn't matter to them. Is they want efficient services when it comes to their team members, okay, which is the basics of HR. Now, whether you talk of a Nullrich model or you talk even in your organization, the basics of HR. People should be paid on time, make sure that there are no errors in performance appraisals and ratings, et cetera, et cetera. That's basic. The second is they want a partner, which has increasingly become important in the past 2 decades. They expect HR to be a partner, okay? That I want you as my partner to help me, advise me as a specialist on certain things which involve hiring, which involve having a career discussion with a person, or coaching or whatever it is, okay? And the third thing they expect is, help me make an impact on business and deliver superior business results. These are 3 things by and large, from my experience of 27 years around the world, that they expect from HR. Now, whether you deliver it with technology, without technology, that's up to you. This is my take on that, yeah. Oh, yeah.
This is how you'd like HR tech to sort of evolve over a period of time. To make that happen, you'd probably require something from the line, right, to make it work, right? So what would be those 2 or 3 things that you would want from the line to make that approach, the whole roadmap work?
Okay.
That was the question.
What facility?
Yeah, so it's the quid pro quo, right? So
So let me give you a live example of what I'm going through in my journey with Sun Pharma right now, okay? And which is not very different from what it was in Philips or in J&J. So what you need as an HR professional from your line is support on your business case for the build-up or transformation that you're doing in your function, okay? And that's very, very crucial. So, now it's been 7.5 months that I've been here with this company. And relatively, I have found my feet sooner and faster. And again, that speaks volumes about the company and the leaders I've joined, how they've facilitated me, very quickly. But I took 4 months to even prepare my HR strategy, forget the business case on technology. And then it took me another 1 month to build my business case on the HR technology. But the reason it took 5 months is not because I didn't have an understanding of the business of the HR tech, it's because I wanted my people to be involved in developing it, rather than me as a CHRO developing it, okay? And then wanting the business leaders to not only approve it, but to support it, because the execution has started now, okay? So when we are moving to a single payroll now, right, we are seeing that people support it. So I think it's a buy-in process. If your business case is clear, if your value proposition is clear, again, those 3 things that I mentioned, you'll fly. But if you're not good at that, well, let me tell you, you'll keep struggling as an HR leader. And if you're struggling as an HR leader, your team is struggling. So that's how I feel, Nandan, in my perspective. I don't know, somebody else might have something.
Yes, can I just add to that? Because I find that question is, slightly different from the experience that we are seeing. I don't think we need to prepare employees at all. In fact, what we are seeing is that employees are constantly pestering us to say, what next can I do? They get bored in 12 to 18 months, right?
Correct.
There is no reason to prep them. There is no reason to tell them that you have to worry about because they're not, right? The market is open. Each of them is carrying 2 offers in their hand if they want to. So what they're actually asking us is, look, are you prepared to give us what is happening in the market? My friends are doing this, my colleagues are doing this. This is how the kind of technology people are working on. The processes are changing. What do you have for us that will engage us? So to my mind, it is not about preparing the employees. It is about, what do we do to make sure that what is available, it is given to them where we can utilize their intellect, the way they're thinking. And therefore, I don't think that's a cause of worry. It is for us to leverage. We run what is popularly known as the hackathons or those sessions where people will come and talk about, here's what we can do. I'll tell you, my constraint today is how much can I take and run with. The pain is to go back and tell 90% employees, look, I'm sorry, I love your idea, but look, here is the money I have to implement this 10%. So I think the paradigm has shifted. We have to figure out, how do we run with people who have 10 times the intellect, 40 times the energy, no fear.
Just to add what he's saying, have you heard of a term called BYOD? First time I heard it, I thought it meant bring your own disaster. I'm not joking. Why? Because when I was working for Microsoft Corporation, this was the term which we heard. And we were told that, look, you old hierarchical idiots, you don't know what the devices people have outside. We have better computers at home than you offer us. We have better networks at home. We have better internet at home. And we had to change and adapt as the older generation of the millennials we hired for to work in Microsoft. And we had to bring your own device. And so we allowed people to bring their own tablets and things like that. And we beefed up the security. That's all we could do, so that because that tablet is going to go to a mall, the tablet is going to go to the kid, the employee's kid. I don't know what he's going to do. He will bring in Trojans. He will bring in a lot of other things which I have no control over, because the tablet is going all over the world with an employee. Even the games his kids are downloading, I have no control. So what did I do? I briefed up my internal security. I said, bring your own device, which I still call disaster, because I'm spending more money on security than I should otherwise. Because if I provide the device, I put in security controls into it.
Correct. And security and also your IP protection, those are the two main.
That's part of security.
So, if you are working for a top-notch consulting firm, or if you are working for a major patent generator, well, let me tell you, your laptops are specially designed where you cannot send an email to an outside network, you cannot insert even a pen drive, nothing.
Yeah.
Because
that's true for us also, as hospitals or healthcare service providers, as they want to
medical
call
data,
it.
yeah?
Because data
Personal
is my
Genpact,
IP.
yeah,
That is the only thing which I generate.
Medical data, personal data in case of Genpact, your credit card data. So, absolutely.
I have credit card and patient data and a lot more. So I am encompassing terabytes of data now on each individual. So when I run big data analytics, the amount of diseases we can predict going to happen to, let's say, Yuvraj or Yash, is phenomenal. It's scary at times. We're just going live next week with the big data analytics, and they ran something on me. I am still struggling to digest that. Next 5 years are not looking healthy for me. I was sharing that with Yuvraj. It's not healthy for me, for sure. And guess what? I've already left parathas. I've already left all the good things which he just reminded me.
I thought it was really sad.
Yeah. And that's all thanks to big data analytics, which we are running. And I'm saying it in a lighter mode, but it's serious work, which all the data we have and the work we need to put in to protect that, because there is so much of analytics which we can run, and predictive analytics for a lot of people, and to a large extent protect them from future diseases. So the cardiologist in the hospital has put me on a strict exercise regime to protect me from possible heart attack, which they foresee in 5 years. More questions, sorry. One more?
One more, yeah.
Okay, one more.
Any burning question, if not.
How do we manage if technology fails?
Technology?
Because we are building and
The architecture
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
designed to handle technology today, from the infrastructure point of view, not the application point of view, which Yash was talking from, is designed to have a failover. So today, if part of my infrastructure goes down, I don't have a fear. It takes a split second, the people on the counter will never know it has changed over.
Yeah,
It
there
doesn't
is-
have to, you don't have to worry about it today because we're living in a virtual world and a virtual environment we have created. My servers get replicated every second in 3 locations. So even if one location goes down, the second location or the third location will take over in a split second and you don't even know.
Yeah, I come from Chennai, and therefore 3 months ago there was a
Yeah,
flood.
huge flood.
And every technology and digital
Yeah, people who did-
devices
yeah.
failed, and we need to go back to boats to rescue people.
I agree on that. I agree on that.
So
That's a
no,
basic
yeah,
human technology which you can't get over.
You're right. So there is nothing such as fail-proof technology that exists in the world today. Let's understand that, and that's where what I mentioned, your hardware interface with your software becomes so important because the hardware on which you're receiving your technology, if that fails, nothing is available to you, right? And then when it comes to just software as a service, that's where cloud technically has an advantage over premise-based because your downtimes by research and by data of cloud-based or in-cloud systems is far lower than on-premise. So these are some experiences available before you set your own this thing, but there's nothing such as fail-proof technology, you know, including Almighty's technology, which is the human being, is not fail-proof,
Or
right?
if you have Yuvraj's son walking around your premise and bringing down your network, then God only help.
God only help you. You know, but I tell you, I can tell you a really funny story, okay? Which wasn't so funny when this happened because we were in the middle of this implementation where we were changing the financial systems, right? And there was some code somewhere, okay? Which I came to know from my boss. He's playing golf with 4 buddies, Piyush. And he calls me and says, Yuvraj, you know, I've got my buddies who were working in the company 10 years ago. They're saying you are sending them messages saying that their full and final has been done, right? And they've left the company 10 years ago, right? So I said, that can't happen. So I obviously ran to to my partner in IT. They said, yeah, something has happened. 40,000 people who had left the company at various stages in their career got SMSs which said, your exit has been filed, your full and final is being done, and we will send you the money as soon as we can, right? There was pandemonium, you know, because some 5-6 of us with our tapes in our hands walking and explaining to Piyush how did that happen, right? And obviously we contained the damage, we figured out why it was happening, it got contained. But the important lesson is, A, to what he said, it will fail, okay? At some stage it can fail, be ready for it. The bigger issue is, so when this got reported to the CEO, because we have a fortnightly report on what's happening, Piyush mentioned that, and thankfully both the CEO and CFO turned around and said, oh well, that's not so bad. It would have been worse if 40,000 people didn't get their salaries, right? That would have been really a disaster. So I think that put a real perspective on which is experience, which is dealing with the inevitability that barring some really critical systems where patients' lives could be in danger, the best designed technology fails. God rest the souls of people who were riding the Challenger shuttle. You think we're designing something which is more complex than that? Probably not, right? It happened twice, right? It will happen.
Crashed. Two space shuttles crashed.
2 space shuttles crash, man, right? So it's going to happen. I think it's about learning from that experience, seeing what can be capped, seeing what can be contained as damage, right? And moving on, because it's an evolution which is going to happen over
The second space shuttle has a funny story. I was based out of Barcelona with GE, and my ex-wife now was expecting my second child, and I was trying to call her from Barcelona. How are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And the phone was unreachable. 1 hour later, and I wanted to tell her, watch the TV, see the space shuttle crash. 1 hour later, my son was born. So I can't forget the date, 1st Feb. 03.
Yeah.
So I think a perfect note to end on, that you've got to keep learning from your experiences and spin it around positively. A big thank you to all our panelists. Thank you, Yash. Thank you, Raj. And of course, thank you, Rajesh.